So I think to get started, Ed, you're first on my screen. Do you want to do a quick intro?
Why is it always me? Why do I have to go? Hi everybody, my name is Ed Morris and I am technical manager for a company called Altecnic. We are predominantly a valve manufacturer, but we supply some stuff into the bathroom world. Me personally, I've been involved with mental health for quite some time. I've suffered with mental health myself. I've done some fundraising recently for mental health as well, obviously with the Mental Health Awareness Week. I've been doing some stuff around that. So yeah, it's just something that I'm passionate about, something that I think that we all need to talk about and certainly sort of spread the message and try and make people open up and talk. So I have nothing more exciting than that, I'm afraid. I'm going to step to that. Hopefully I can bring a bit more to the actual conversation, but as I go, that's about where I am.
Thanks, Ed. James, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely, thank you, Amy. My name is James Capell-Abra. I work for Stress Matters. We are a workplace wellbeing organisation, so we help to make wellbeing easy for businesses. My role is I'm lead mental health first aid instructor, so I look after anything to do with mental health in the business. I also live with depression and anxiety myself, so I've been through a bit of a journey, and I'm likely to be on that journey, I think, for the rest of my life. So I've got a bit of experience in the area of mental health, and yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to today's session.
Brilliant, thanks, James. And last but not least, Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sofia Charalambous. I'm co-founder and owner of Bathroom Origins. We supply mirrors, accessories and storage to the bathroom retail network. I also have experience of anxiety and mental health in myself and in my family. And as a small business owner, I have to be a counsellor for my staff, and you know, at times it's very hard to know what to do.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. For anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Amy Kirk. I work in digital and marketing for the Bathroom Manufacturers Association. I'm going to be the chair and chipping in on my thoughts throughout the session. So I think a good place to start is to understand really what we mean by mental health and what the difference is between good mental health and ill mental health. So James, do you want to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we hear it quite a lot when people talk about mental health. The place that we go to in our mind is we think negatively about it. We think if we're talking about mental health that we're talking about a problem. But the truth is that we all have mental health. There is no overall health without mental health. And where I think the language gets muddled up is we're not talking about mental ill health, or we are, but sometimes we just call it mental health. So I think there needs to be this clarification between what is mental health and what is mental ill health, and that's the tricky thing that's the thing that I think when it comes to language that a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah, definitely. I know from my side, I'm very fortunate at this stage in my life anyway that I haven't suffered from any real mental ill health. But I do live with somebody who's suffered with it since she was a teenager. It's something that she's gone through for a long time and will do for a long time. And I think if you're on my end of the scale where you're fortunate enough to not suffer from it, it's very hard to understand the difference between those two sides of it.
I set off on a journey back sort of in March time to try and raise a bit of awareness of mental health within the industry that we predominantly sit in, which is plumbing and heating. I was seeing that there was a lot of young guys, a lot of young engineers who were, you know, there was suicides being committed, there's all sorts of stuff that was going on. So all I wanted to do was sort of open up a door for people to understand that you can talk to people, do you know what I mean? That you don't, you know, the issue with the plumbing and heating industry, and I please don't think I'm saying this in a sex way, it is a very male-dominated industry. You know, there's a lot of young guys in there with a lot of arrogance, a lot of confidence, and it almost puts people back into a shell who don't necessarily feel right at that moment in time, and they feel like they can't talk because it's not the right thing to do. It's not, you know, as a young fit lad who's, you know, out as a plumber, you shouldn't feel the way that you feel. And I think what was always important was to say to people, it's okay to feel like you feel. Don't lock it away. Don't sit in your van or in your own headspace and worry about how you're feeling. Open up to somebody. It could be anybody. You know, I when I went through it years ago, I didn't know who to turn to. I had no idea what to do, and I ended up turning to my mother and talking to her about it. But it's not just close people. There's many people that you can talk to. And sometimes talking to a stranger, somebody who's completely impartial to anything in your life, you can just listen to what you've got to say, because everybody's problems in ill mental health are very personal to them. Everybody's got a very different trigger point. That's what I found out through my own experiences. The things that, you know, I see people that talk to me who get upset and stressed about things, the things that wouldn't necessarily be my trigger points, but the things that are my trigger points may not be anything that triggers anybody around this table. So certainly when I set off on my journey, I just did a sponsored walk. I said, right, I'm gonna set myself up a goal to raise £250. I'm gonna walk every single day in the day of March, and I'll just do some videos every single day, talk about my journey, some good stories, some sad stories, some funny stories. But I ended up, as soon as I was walking 100 miles, I ended up walking 175 miles. I raised just over £5,000. But off the back of that, so that money went to the Mental Health Foundation. But off the back of that, it allowed people who didn't necessarily know me, but people who follow my journey, to have a direct message into somebody to talk to. So I was getting people from my work, people from the industry. So, you know, we did a little bit on Twitter because I have a Twitter feed, and there was people coming to me. And at one point, it was like, I felt like I was a mental health first aid, you know, because people come to me saying, I'm feeling this, or I know somebody who's feeling this. But just having the fact that they know that somebody's there to talk to, I think was a massive help. And I can't coach people through this. I'm not a trained specialist in this, but what I have got is an ear to listen, and if they want it, a mouth to give an opinion, you know, or some feedback to them. So it certainly has opened up a door for me, certainly within Altecnic, within Abyss. Altecnic have been a massive support in this. They've supported me every single step of the way through the journey, and they've allowed me to be the person that I wanted to be able to be to get to the end of this journey. And it has certainly helped. And having different people from all different aspects of our business. You know, we have the business help in different ways. We have like warehousing, we have sales, we have internal stuff. But people from all walks of that have come to me and said, you know what, I really appreciate what you're doing. I've not quite been feeling right. I'm going to go and talk to somebody. And for me, just one person doing that served its purpose, but for 10, 15, 20 people to do it, you know, certainly was you know, really good for me.
As a business owner, I have to make sure that I'm up to date with what's happening out there, and I still need to appoint someone to do a mental health first aid course. But because I've had experience with myself and with family members, I know how to signpost people to where they need to go to anyway. But as a business owner, I have to be very aware, and I can see when my staff are not quite right, not feeling well, and I'll go up to them. They know there's because we're a small family business, they know they can come and talk to me privately to discuss how they're feeling. So we make an open door policy anyway. But in terms of a business, I think you definitely, one person needs to be a mental first health aid. Oh, I've got it the wrong way around, haven't I? Mental health first aider, because not everyone knows how to signpost. And as Ed says, you know, I'm not coached, I'm not a specialist, but because of what I've been through, I know how to send them there. And it's very difficult for an owner to make sure that their team are kept well, and where does that owner go to get the information that they need to support their team. So when I mean a small business, I'm talking about, you know, a one-man band up to 20-30 people, and it's very difficult. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position that I can support the team, but there's so many businesses that it doesn't even cross their radar that this is what they should be doing, and they might see someone who's not doing well. They might actually think, oh, they're just being stroppy. They may not be aware what mental health looks like.
What the aim should be for all businesses is to raise awareness and to have the systems and the supports in place to effectively help and support people who are in distress, who need it. Now, that looks very different for smaller businesses and larger businesses, of course. But we do mental health first aider training. We you know, quite often we'll train one person in a small business, or we'll do, you know, big rollouts for much larger businesses. In larger businesses, we try to get them to focus on, rather than just ticking a box, actually thinking about having mental health first aiders that represent the whole business, that have a diverse that represent the diversity of the business in terms of hierarchy, in terms of sex, in terms of ethnic minority, so that people feel that there is at least one person in the organisation that they can actually go and talk to. Obviously, in a much smaller business, it's very difficult to do that, and really you're only just looking to have 1 or 2 people, but choosing the right 1 or 2 people to be trained is important. I think, you know, what Ed was saying about the fact that, you know, people started talking to him, and he's not trained, but he knows from his own experience how to show empathy to that person, and how to be an ear to listen to what's going on for them. Well, ultimately, that's what mental health first aider training does. It teaches you, regardless of whether you've had experience of mental ill health yourself or not, how to I mean, it's actually the same. The aims are actually the same as physical first aid. It's that they are to prevent, to preserve life, to prevent further harm, to promote recovery, and to provide comfort. And as a mental health first aider, that's what you learn to do. And that's why I think it's really important, regardless of the size of business that you're in, to think about what kind of support you are offering to your team, and how they can talk about how open the culture is. Do they feel able to approach somebody, regardless if they're trained or not, to actually talk to them about what's going on? And then does that person know what to do in that situation, to be supportive, to be non-judgmental, to show that they are actually listening, and provide the correct signposting so that person can get the help they need?
I think you've got a really good point there, James. And I think, like, I don't mean this in any disrespect to anybody in our organisation, but we have 4 or 5 mental health first aiders within Altecnic, and I don't mean this against any of them personally, but I wouldn't talk to either one of those people. Which is, you know, they've all put themselves forward, and the business has chosen those people to do it, but they're not the people that I would turn to open up if I was struggling. And that's nothing against them personally. I just wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. So I think as an organisation, it's really difficult to choose the right people to do it. And sometimes, as I found out, you don't have to have it at the bottom of your email, you know, or to say that you're a trained mental health person. If you're approachable as a person, I think people will do it. And I think one of the big issues with ill mental health is that as businesses, we have to be able to deal with it. We have to be able to support the colleagues and employees that we have within our industry. However, I'm probably, James, you may be able to correct me, but 80 or 90% of the issues that these people are suffering are not actually work related. It's something to do with their personal life outside of the workplace. But unfortunately, that impact comes into the organisation. So that the business is trying to support them. It's nothing to actually do with the organisation itself. But the impact that, you know, anxiety, depression, all that has, you know, your loss of focus, your tiredness, your withdrawal symptoms, all that kind of stuff, have the biggest impact on your career and your workplace. And it's something that the business has a really fine line to try and manage. You know, you can't just try and say, well, it's not my problem, you've got to move away. They've got a duty of care to make sure that you're okay. But, you know, James, I guess that figure's right. It's a high percentage that the actual problems are external and not actually related to the workplace itself.
Yeah, just to quickly add to that, Ed, the statistics actually show that the figures, and this is pre-pandemic, that mental ill health costs businesses in the UK on average £1,700 per employee per year. So if you just take the cold hard finance business case hat, you know, and ignore the fact that actually we want to look out for our people, we want them to be well, this is costing businesses money. You know, in presenteeism, where people are at work but not being productive, absenteeism, where people are actually absent from work because of mental ill health, and staff turnover, where people are leaving their work because of distress that it's causing them, anxiety, depression, whatever it might be. Just in those 3 factors alone, this is costing businesses on average £1,700 per employee per year. It speaks for itself.
Jim from Neopil's put forward a good point that it's also a tough job for mental health first aiders, because obviously they could be dealing with some really tough topics. They also need the support on, and they need to know that they have somebody that they can turn on to talk these things through as well. So it's got to go up the chain. It can't all be falling on the shoulders of those mental health first aiders.
That's the problem. Yeah. It can actually start really feeding back into you.
Yeah.
And yeah, there needs to come a point where you need this support network with you. And I think that's really difficult for the small companies. And maybe the BMA can sort of help setting up a support network for the mental health first aiders, because there's times when you actually need to turn around to someone and say, you actually need to take a break from that role for a bit.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found, Jim, and it's a really good point that you make there, is that when I did my bit through March of raising awareness, every single day I was doing a video, every single day I was doing a walk, which was fantastic because I was physically getting stronger, so my mental health was getting stronger. But I was sharing posts, you know, across various platforms and different stuff, and I found myself immersed in a world of mental health support. And unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, it's a negative world, because people are coming to talk to you because they're in a bad place.
Yeah.
And as much as I enjoyed it, Jim, as you just absolutely rightly said, I was then pulled back into a place of everything I was doing and focus on was around mental health. And sometimes you have to take a step back from it to be able to get yourself reset, to be able to be a good person to help people support. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm a youth mental health first aider with the Scout Association, and we have this sort of support network there. And we do know that if we do deal with anything harrowing, and we do, then somebody's got to be strong enough to say, you're taking a break, mate.
Yeah.
You know, you need to, we're not kicking you out, but we're just saying you just need to step back now from that role for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's depending on what you're dealing with. I think a lot of us in mental health first aid role have experienced mental ill health. And that's why we have the empathy to be able to give back.
Yeah.
But you also have to be careful where it takes you.
Yeah.
Because it can start dragging up all sorts of memories and all sorts of problems. You know, we've really got to look after each other. And I do feel for the guys out there on their own in these small companies.
Yeah.
And that's definitely an area where an organisation like the BMA, Chambers of Commerce, just get together and just talk stuff through.
So one of the things we offer when we do mental health first aider training is everybody who goes through our program gets an invite to a private alumni group where everybody in there is a mental health first aider. And it's moderated by the mental health first aid instructors here at Stress Matters. And we recognise that this is a problem, Jim, and you're absolutely right. And there are a lot of people who come through our programme who are from small businesses, and they just put 1 or 2 people on a public course. But where do they go to for help? Well, I mean, first of all, the mental health first aid course we do a lot of work on how to look after yourself, how to look out for yourself, self-care, recognising when you're becoming stressed and what to do about it, and all of that kind of stuff. But then we also offer afterwards that support as part of an alumni group to reach out if you are on your own in business and someone's come to you and they've talked about something that is causing you distress, that you can go to that group and get support from them. But yeah, I think it's a great idea also for associations like the BMA to think about how you can set up those kind of peer systems and like kind of buddy support systems for exactly that. I think it's a great idea, Jim.
So we got together a couple of weeks ago in the run up to this just to have a conversation about what we could cover. And obviously one of the biggest impacts at the moment is the pandemic. There's no avoiding it. And the impact that people that have been working from home and going back into the offices, and the anxiety and the stress that could maybe bring about. Have you put anything in place, any of you, in terms of your businesses to help support staff on the journey back into the office, because it is going to be a huge transition again for a lot of employees?
Yeah, I mean, us at Altec, I think as we said before, we were in a position where we have an open plan office, which we pre-pandemic we just spent a hell of a lot of money sort of doing up, and then obviously everyone got sent home in the panic of the first pandemic. And I think it took time for everyone to adjust, and then we sort of slightly started to come out of lockdown again. So then it was like back to screens. So we put all screens up around the office, so everyone's individual bay became their own space, etc. But I think, you know, I mean, we spoke about this before, you know, there was a massive adjustment for a lot of people to go from an open office space to being in their own space, and almost been given the trust to say, right, okay, your working hours are 8:30 till 5. We can't see what you're doing, but you've been entrusted by the business now and informed by the government that you've got to go away and do that. And then people are just starting to get used to it. Some of people are starting to quite like it. I think, you know, I think there's a lot of murmurings now as we're sort of talking about coming back into the office space, where people are saying, well, I'm not sure I want to anymore. And I don't think it's for a safety. I think people have enjoyed the sort of, you know, the little bit of freedom that they've had. But I think as organisations and businesses, we have to do what's best for the business first and foremost, because we all need to have a job. We all need to focus and move forward in that. And I think that the business has got to be quite understanding of what people say, but they've also got to be relatively firm in saying, well, you know, pre-pandemic we operated like this. We are going to get back to pre-pandemic levels to a degree at some point. You know, the world has changed, absolutely has, but there's also a requirement for businesses to still be able to function. And some roles, unfortunately, I don't think are as you know, as viable to do from home as what they are in office space. You know, they're just not as productive. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. It's just roles were designed to be done in an office space, in a team of people. And if those team of people are spread across 100 square miles, it doesn't always have the same effect, does it?
So one of the things that we've been working with our clients on, particularly over the past 3 months, when thinking about their return to work or return to the office plan, is thinking about building flexibility into their wellbeing plan and using that as a vehicle for working out what that looks like coming back into the workplace. So I'm sure you'll all agree that certain people have really enjoyed being at home, and they've actually started to realize that I don't want to go back into the office full time. And certain people have absolutely hated it. I just seen a comment there from Mike saying that people who live alone, you know, some people are really suffering from that lack of social interaction, which is absolutely true. But some people have got no plans to go back into the office. So from an organizational perspective, the challenge there is thinking about how you can work out your policies, your procedures, your guidance, and everything else to accommodate the needs and wants of everybody. Because ultimately, if we do that, we get the best out of the people who are working with us. And if we let them work the way that they want to work, we get higher productivity and we succeed more as a business. So that's what we've been helping organizations to do. Look at their data, look at their insights, look at the feedback from the employees about how they feel about what's going on and how they feel about potentially going back into the office, what their concerns are, and what their ideal working space and working day looks like. You know, is it 9 to 5, or actually do they want to flex their hours? And being flexible with the approach that you take to accommodate all of these different thoughts and ideas, but in a way that works for the business as well. And I think that's the real challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, coming out of the pandemic, I think one of the silver linings is that there is more emphasis on businesses to think about employee well-being and mental health within businesses. I think the pandemic's had a huge shift in that way. Is there anything in particular that businesses can do in terms of helping to signpost what well-being resources that they have? Is there any well-being resources available for businesses that they can tap into to help their employees?
I was going to ask that question too.
I was waiting for James to unmute himself, to be honest.
I didn't want to. I just spoke, but it did sound like I might be able to add some value to that one, so I'll go. Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that businesses can do is make sure that they put this into their culture. So don't treat this as a tick box activity. So many businesses go, right, we need to be seen to be doing something about mental health. So let's put some things up on the intranet or on the portal. Let's send some emails out. And right, okay, everyone knows now what they need to do if they're not feeling great. We're done. And that's when, you know, you don't get engagement, and it's just a waste of time. And I think employees can see that as well. They're just like, oh, they're trying to be seen to be doing something, but it doesn't really make a difference. Where you can make a difference is truly raising awareness over a longer period of time and embracing that into your culture. So making sure that your managers are trained on what signs and symptoms to look out for, what behavior change might be worrying, how to approach a situation like that. And then in that scenario, finding out what that person actually needs. Do they need to be signposted to their EAP? Do they need some time off and to go and get a GP appointment? Do they just need somebody to talk to And could that be you as a line manager, or is it a case of encourage them to talk to their partner or their friends or another colleague? There are lots of different ways to signpost people to what they need, but ultimately you have to have a conversation first to find out what that is. Now, some people aren't going to be comfortable having that conversation, so it is a good idea also to have a library of information, and we should respect that people will approach this in different ways. People have got different learning styles. Some people will want to talk to somebody, some people will want to have a look on, you know, on the portal and see, read through PDFs and watch some videos and kind of self signpost to what they need to do next. And so I think, but the key for this is actually getting the insights initially, actually finding out from your team what their well-being is like and what their learning styles are and how they would engage in things and what the interaction has been for existing initiatives. If we know that, then we can design initiatives and signposting and things that are going to truly be helpful to that group of people. One of the biggest questions I get is, what's the best well-being initiative that I should be having in my business right now? Well, the best one is the one that meets the needs of your people. It's not, oh, well, this works really well for these people or for this organization, because we're all different, and you need to understand that in your team first. All too often, the businesses go, oh, we need to do something, and they just go, right, let's get an EAP, let's do a webinar, let's send a few emails out, that'll do. And I think that's where we need to change the language, change the rhetoric, change the thought of embracing this into our culture and having it as an ongoing thing that we do all the time, and base it around education and insights on what our team needs rather than just ticking boxes.
I was going to give an example of, you know, what we do at Bathroom Origins. Again, being a small business, you know, we have informal chats. We can tell when someone's not feeling well. But how would a business know, or that the management or the owners of the business know what to do? How do they know that this is an obligation? I mean, unless one of their employees brings it up to them, some of the businesses I see, they don't have a clue about well-being at all. So how would they go about it, James? All the questions are coming to you.
That's okay. So yeah, it's a really good question. I think in terms of it being an obligation, yeah, it's a tricky one, because a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, like you say, just kind of go, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't know anything about it. I might make things worse. So I'm just going to let that person deal with their own mental health stuff in their own time. It's not a business problem. It's not a work problem. I'll just let them deal with it. Now, the risk of that, of course, is that person is suffering. They're not going to be potentially good at their job. They might experience presenteeism, absenteeism, or even leave because of it. So it's costing the business money. So I think if we start to look at it as a business problem, first and foremost, actually, you know, this is a problem for the business, just because it might not be, it might not be that is something happening in the business that's causing that person distress. It is still important for us. And in terms of, so if you recognize that, first of all, then you're going to be able to engage with that person more. You're going to be more incentivized to engage with that person to try and help them. But then in terms of actually helping them, I think, like Ed said, some people, because they've had experience of this kind of thing before, don't necessarily feel that they need to be mental health first aid trained, and can just listen to people and empathize with them and kind of work out themselves what they then need to do next, whether it be go to a GP, take some time off, explore getting talking therapies, whatever it might be. But a lot of people don't know that, and I think that's where a lot of people just say, I know that this is a problem, but I don't want to make it worse. I don't know about mental health, and just ignore the problem. And that's where mental health first aid training is really great, because it gives you the confidence to be able to either approach that person, or if that person approaches you, know exactly what you need to do and exactly how you can explore supporting that person, and signposting them to, you know, whatever it is that is going to be useful for them moving forwards.
I was just going to say, we speak about the way that we're going to be moving forward. Obviously, there are going to be roles, or organisations are going to allow people to work remotely, etc. And I think the difficulty that provides for certainly us as managers within organisations, of teams of people, and of other people, is how do we then identify if somebody's struggling, if we only ever see them over a 10-minute catch up on a Teams call? Like, I know people, some people, quite well, some people who are on this call that I know and I know what they're like as people, and I think I would notice differently because I see them quite often. If I'm ever catching up with them on a 10-minute call or over email, how do we then start to identify that people are struggling? Because if they're locked behind their own four walls, and one thing I found in the first lockdown is that there was no differential between home and work, because home was work. Do you know what I mean? And I can move around all the rooms in my house, but I'm still at home. I don't have that sort of that reason to leave the house to go to work, to have that sort of emphasis on doing that. For a period of time last year, I was working downstairs in the kitchen, and I felt like I was spending all of my life in the kitchen because I'd worked there for 8 hours a day. I'd cook my dinner. Okay, I might go into the lounge for a couple of hours, but then I'm living my life. And then I went and worked in the lounge, but then I was finding that I was spending all the time in the lounge, spending an hour in the kitchen cooking, then going back into the lounge, and there was never any routine or any differential between home and work. So although it does have positives, I think people getting time back. I think Tom said before, when we had our catch before, he got 2 hours of his life back by not having to travel to the office, which is fantastic and stuff. But how do we identify people on in front of us, and we know their characteristics? How do we pick up on that? It's a difficult thing to do, I think.
I've got a little tip here for that. And I think a lot of people think, oh, well, yeah, how can I see these signs and symptoms if I'm not there with that person? The biggest thing that we can focus on when we're trying to identify that somebody is struggling is actually behavior change. And you talked about this earlier, Ed, in that what the trigger points for you are very different to everybody else, and that's absolutely spot on. And if you know your colleagues and you know what they normally would do, what their routines normally are, how quickly they would normally do a piece of work, the way that they would normally talk to you, like, so if you you get to know somebody and you know what and you'll realize this subconsciously, you'll know that there's kind of a baseline normal for them, and it's picking up on the behavior change that's important. If somebody all of a sudden is not coming on camera on meetings, if somebody all of a sudden is not getting their stuff in, they're working on deadlines, if somebody's ignoring your calls where they normally wouldn't, these are the things that then might prompt us to proactively approach that person and say, hey, you okay? And give them a call. So rather than that call being, or that question being at the end of a work call, saying, oh, hey, by the way, are you okay? Having it as a dedicated call to say, look, I have noticed this behavior change. I just wanted to call and check and make sure you're okay. Is there anything going on at the moment? Can I help with anything? And that person still might not talk to you, but that's the thing. As just a little tip there, focus on behavior change. You don't have to be on the lookout all of the time for very specific signs and symptoms.
I think one of the things is,
if you notice behavior change, check in on that person.
Yeah, with anybody who suffer with mental health challenges, if you said it, we become the world's best actors, don't we? We put on the world's best front. Do you know what I mean? People look and see it. I've told people that I've struggled, I was struggling before, and I said, no, not you, and never, because you do put this facade, you put this front, and you become a BAFTA-nominated, actor, because in your own head, in your own space, your life is so difficult. The front that you give out, people say, there's no way that you're struggling. And I think that's the difficult thing, is to break down that facade. Sometimes I think piece by piece to try and get to work. Some people, say James, will show it emotionally on the outset, and you can physically see that they're in a bad place. When I struggled, I've struggled recently, and I've put my front back up again to show people I wasn't. But I got to a point, not to know about that, I need to talk to somebody and just get it off my chest, and that's all I had to do. But it is very much, we do become, locked in a caricature almost, don't we? Of I'm okay, to the outside world, which I think is difficult for everybody looking into where you are. I
think it's all about just having those conversations. Businesses just have to start having these types of conversations with their employees that they might not have had before. I don't think it's going to be an overnight conversation. It's going to be a case of building those relationships and building that trust with your staff and with your peers that you can talk about these issues.
The one message I think people often, how do you get the message across to your directors and to other people who don't seem to understand about mental ill health? The one message I think that has to be got across to them is, although we talk about it being mental ill health, the effects are intensely physical. And people don't seem to understand that. That's why you get this, oh, well, yeah, come on, just buck up, you'll be fine. Depression is not the same as being sad. Anxiety is not being stressed. The physical effects that these people are suffering are horrific.
Yeah.
And you really need to get that message across. If you've never experienced it, if you've never suffered from it, you don't want to feel as crap as myself and Ed have felt at times.
Yeah.
I've been on a bed with ECGs being stuck on me because the symptoms of anxiety look so much like a heart attack.
Yeah.
And then they took my ECG and said, there ain't nothing wrong with you. Your heart's as strong as anything. But I tell you what, my GP looked at me and said, oh, Christ. So you really need to get that message across to people.
Yeah. No, you are right. So the anxiety, the lack of appetite, the tiredness, the withdrawal, all of that is, anxiety is a thing that just rips through your body, and it's all consuming. That's what I felt when I suffered anxiety, is it just takes over. And
literally your muscles are tense. You're so much are constantly pumping through with adrenaline.
You don't see to the truth.
You are ill. I mean, you are really physically ill at that point in time.
Yeah, it's a good point. The mental side of it does have a physical impact as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think one takeaway from my side at the BMA from this is that we need to do more as an association to help our members with signposting and with any help and support that we can, working with organisations like James at Stress Matters to help our members help their staff. Sophia, you've got your hand up.
I was going to actually say is about promoting to the small businesses the importance of having a well-being policy. To me, it's so obvious that many companies don't, because one, they're not aware of it. So one, how do we make them aware? And one avenue is the BMA. And once they're made aware, they've got to see the point of having this wellness policy. And I don't know whether this sounds really bad, but businesses may just be thinking, well, my staff, what they do outside is not my problem. They need to be made aware that the outside problems will affect their business, and if it's brought into if it's shown in a way that mental health is making this business lose X amount of money, they might actually stand up and listen, thinking, well, I have to do it. Because when I talk to many other business owners, not necessarily in our industry, I have the same complaints about their staff, or they're late, or they're absent, or they're not productive. And I say to them, and what is the culture of that business? What are you like? We have calls coming in from our different retailers over the country, and we can tell which ones have a good management system just by the way their employees speak to us. It's as simple as that. And it's scary to see how some management styles filter through to their staff. So if they've got a bad management style, then how are they going to embrace a wellness policy to help their employees?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to open the floor now for if anyone's got any other questions or comments on today's session. This is something that we're going to be doing a bit more regularly as an association. It's not just a one-off for us. It's something that we're keen to develop and progress with our members, and it's quite a hot topic, not just because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, but I think it's the pandemic's brought this to the forefront for a lot of businesses. So we want to make sure that we're supporting our members on this.
I think as well, like just going back to the ongoing support, I don't think we've seen the start of the impact of the pandemic until till furlough starts to end and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's really where we need to start laying the foundations now for the next 12, 18 months, and furthermore, to put this message out there, and it's a really fine line, and it's a really difficult balancing act, I think, of showing support because you're not just ticking a box, but genuinely meaning it, knowing it's going to be an ongoing thing, because James, you touched on before, people can do it to tick a box, and I understand they have to do that, but there are real people involved in this. It's people's lives. It's human beings that are suffering. We've all got to show a bit of empathy, I think, at times, and understand the impacts that it does have. And the actions that we have as people. I'm not sitting here saying I'm a perfect person. I've never, done anything that could have upset. I've never done it intentionally, but we all need to be a little bit conscious of how we are as people and the things that we say and the things that we do to make sure that we're a little bit sort of understanding of how other people may be feeling surrounding the pandemic and everything that's going to follow it, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this morning. Thanks James, Ed and Sophia for leading the chat. Thank you all for taking part, and I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.